My name is Frank Dean, and I was an ardent supporter of Black Dyke for many, many years. There was a gentleman called Tom Watson, and I got talking to him one day, and he was a brass band fanatic, and I'd heard it played in the local band when he was younger. And he said to me, "Have you ever heard the Black Dyke, my lad?" I said, "No." He says, "You've heard nothing yet." He said, "If you get chance, you go listen to Black Dyke," he said. "They're the tops." And that's how I came to be interested in them. And then when I went to work in Leeds, and I was a bit older, quite a bit older actually, because I think I was a little boy when he first asked me the question. But I got to the stage where I was able to afford my own transport. And I went up to, I used to go around following them at weekends. And my parents were elderly, and I used to take them for a ride out. And Thorn used to have a top band every week in the summer. And my sister lived at Selby, which was nearby. So I used to collect my parents from Harrogate, and off we'd go for an afternoon picnic to the park at Thorn to hear the band, whatever it is. And I was there one Sunday, and my parents were there listening, but they couldn't stick as long of it as I would, so I used to take them back to Selby where my sister lived, and then turn round and go back to hear Black Dyke it was. And I was coming out of the loo one day, and one of the players was just going in, Grenville Richmond, the trombonist. He said, "Wherever we are, you're there," he says. I said, "Oh, I'm just interested in it." He says, "Well, have you never been up to the band room?" I said, "No." He said, "You must come." I said, "Is it allowed?" "It's allowed," he said. "I'll meet you outside on whatever the rehearsal night was at 7 o'clock, and then you come in with me." And I excitedly looked forward to that that week. It was Thursday night I was going up, and I went up and I sat in my car waiting for him to arrive. And I asked one of the players that was coming in, I said, "Could you tell me if Mr. Richmond has gone in yet?" He said, "No, he'd not be in yet, I don't think." And I waited, and then I heard the band strike up about 7:30. And I dared go in because Mr. Richmond didn't seem to be there. And it turned out he wasn't. He had a medical condition and couldn't go to the rehearsal. And so I was too shy to go across to the band room, and I turned round and went home. And he'd given me his phone number to ring. And he rang me and apologised, but the doctor had signed him off for a week, he wouldn't be there. But he said, "You should have gone in, it would have been all right." But he said, "If you come up next, whatever it was, day," and he says, "I'll definitely be there and meet you and take you in." And he took me into the band room, and he says, sit there at the side of us trombone players." He said, "Don't worry what anybody says, but nobody's allowed to sit there." He says, "But you sit there tonight." And I sat there at that seat every rehearsal from then on, and nobody else was allowed to sit there. And I've come to rehearsals late sometimes, and there's been people listening that were standing, and my seat was empty. He mustn't sit there, he'll be arriving soon. So that's how I come to have my introduction with them. But that bandsman at Pateley, it always stuck in my mind how he used to say, "You've heard nothing until you've heard Black Dyke." And that made me want to hear them, you see. And when I was working in Leeds, it was convenient. I passed my driving test. And when I wasn't on duty, I went up there, and it started that way. Well, I don't remember exactly when, but I hadn't been going up there long when one of them says, but they'd seen me drive into other venues where they were playing, you see. And that's how Grenville Richmond came to be curious. And that day was going in the toilet at Thorn at the interval. That's how he got talking to me. He says, "Why don't you come to the band room, you see?" And then I think he said, would you like to go on if you go in next week to our concert, wherever it was, I'm not sure. He said, was you going to that? I said, yes. He said, well, come on the bank bus. I said, is it allowed? And he says, yes, I'll make it right with Geoffrey Whittam, the conductor. That's how I come to go on the band bus from then on. Then I started coming here regularly, and it was the highlight of my week. Jim Shepherd was the principal cornet player the first time I went there, and Geoffrey Whittam was the conductor. And I started going to rehearsals regularly, and I started going on the band bus regularly when I was available. And they used to pick me up at Wetherby at weekends because my parents lived at Harrogate, so I used to go there and then come and they'd pick me up at Wetherby with the band, depending on my rota of work, because I used to work alternate weekends. And it became a regular thing. Then they asked me to give a hand selling the records one night, and it became part of my regular job was selling the records, usually at the interval. Some places didn't allow it until the concert had finished. I got to enjoy that, you see. Tommy Waterman on soprano cornet. Frank Berry, I think he'd just joined when I first went, on trombone. Derek Southcott sat next to him, and David Summersgill was the bass trombone. And I think those are the prominent ones. And I can remember some of the bass players, Big Derek and Ernest Keaton. And Ernest Keaton, once at a contest, it was the last rehearsal at home before travelling to the contest. And he said to me at the end of the night, he says, we shall win this. I says, do you think so? He says, I know we shall win this. He says, him upstairs has said so. And I thought, oh, he's quite a religious man. And I dared laugh because I could see he was serious. And he said, you take it from me, he'll win this on Saturday. He's told me so. And that's how I remember the first win. Charlie Emmett's funeral was a very moving occasion. The band played outside his house before they brought his body out in the coffin. And to this day, it's the most beautiful playing I've ever heard. It was deep harmony and very, very moving. And when they finished, everybody just stood and bowed their heads silently. And then the band marched off in front of the hearse through Queensbury to the church, and people were stood outside watching, and I was walking behind at the back somewhere, and it was a very moving occasion. When I came to band practice, the conductor that was usually taking them was Geoffrey Whittam, and it was some time after when they appointed Geoffrey Brand as a professional for competition work and that sort of thing. And I think Roy Newsom would be the next to take over, but I'm not absolutely sure. My memory's playing tricks a little bit. There was a difference, yes, but it's difficult to explain. But with Geoffrey Brand, he really put that extra bit of polish on performances, and it was electric at times. He was very, very good, and he was strong. He was a strong leader. Because some of the band lads could be testing, but they all had the band at heart. Any comments, whatever, it was always through the right reason. They just wanted to see things happen correctly. I think Geoffrey left because he was involved in the national finals, and he felt it would be wrong to be conducting Black Dyke when he was a shareholder or whatever it was in the finals, and it was a big blow when he stood down. Oh, I liked Major Parks. My memory of Major Parks was I didn't know he was coming. I'd just arrived for a rehearsal, and I was walking down the passage where where the toilet was, and this man's coming down the steps with a baton in his hand, and he said, "Where's these toilets?" And I said, "There." And then I walked on quickly because I thought he'll get the shock of his life when he sees these posh toilets, so-called. And the other thing I remember about, I think it was one of his very early rehearsals, when they were having the break during rehearsal, he used to come outside and light the cigarettes or whatever and unwind. And Major Parks came down ahead of the band. I don't remember my own position, but I was there, and I said how I'd enjoyed it, and he said to me, he said they better enjoy it. He says otherwise they won't want me anymore up here. I said I don't think it's quite like that. He says you bet you are. If they're not satisfied with you, you'll be on your way. And so I was always surprised to hear that remark from him. But obviously some people wouldn't adjust to him maybe in those days. But he was a special conductor, as all of them were.
And how do you think the band reacted to Major Parks?
I think that the tendency to ask questions. And Major Parks once said, I once asked him what's the difference between here and the Guards band. Oh, he said, this band's far ahead of the Guards. I said, really? He said, yes. I said, why is that? He said, well, my band in the army, you're not allowed to question the conductor, and it's not always a good thing because sometimes you can learn from one another. But in the army, you spoke and they did. My memories of Jim Shepherd were what a wonderful player and what a modest man he was, and it was just a joy to sit and listen to him. Philip was a bit more difficult to get to know as a fan, but once I'd broken the ice speaking to him, I always enjoyed his comments. More serious man than Jim, but a perfectionist. But I mean, early days of me coming up there, I used to feel so proud just to be friends with them. Right. And everybody always had time to speak to you. But he said, when band business was on, everybody had to go out of the room while band business was on. I said, but about 2 years later after that, one night I was up there and it came to business, and they all said, you've no need to go out. And I felt very honoured about that. But I always knew that what you hear and see in Black Dyke Band Room, you don't make public if you know they wouldn't want it. At that point, with all respect, I used to think Roy was too nice a person, and he was very sensitive, and he had a lot to put up with sometimes, and he was an absolute gentleman. How he coped, I often wondered, but he did. It was a joy to turn up in the rehearsal some years later, and there he was, he'd made a comeback. I thought he was very brave to come back, and he was a different man. He'd more experience anyway by then. One other thing about going to Black Dyke, I used to play in our village band at Pateley Bridge, and after hearing them I never played again. I just daredn't, and I didn't want to. I wanted to go up there and listen. The first tour I went on, I think, was the Swiss tour. And then I think the Canadian tour came after that, but I am open to correction. The Canadian tour, that was extra special. I did pay my own way on the Canadian tour, but with all respect, the tours after that, I never once asked, and they always arranged for me to be included, and then I used to sell the records at the interval, and often, of course, accompanied by Ehrman, the long-standing elderly supporter. One of the tours I remember, the band had a football match, and Philip McCann broke his ankle, and I had to go in goal. Well, I was goalkeeper at Pateley Bridge in those days, But they got 2 quick goals, and big Derek Jackson come and said, "Get them shoes off," he says. "They're going in too easy. I'll take over now." And he went in and he let as many in. But they were very happy days. He had to sit down for his solos at Philip. My memories of the Canadian tour were of a misunderstanding in the title of the band, and that's why it wasn't well attended, we were told, because Black Dyke has a different interpretation out there to hear. Harry Mortimer, he was the guest conductor. He went down all right, but Geoffrey Brand was there. And I remember Geoffrey Brand coming to take over the baton for the second half, I think it was. And I heard him say to one of the players, or to the band in general, "Come on, this concert wants brightening up, livening up, it's too solemn." And he, knowing Geoffrey as he was, he brought them in and the music was alive. I have some lovely memories of players, and one that comes to mind was Malcolm Turton. And as far as my memory serves me, I was getting on there was a concert on the Saturday night in Lancashire somewhere, and the band were going to pick me up at a bus stop before they climbed the Pennine area. And Malcolm Turton was going to be at the same spot. He was coming back that bit early from his honeymoon. And so we got on the bus, and Malcolm bought some fish and chips. He'd had some food packed by his wife for the journey, and if my memory serves me right, he bought these fish and chips. And then he said, "She'll have to do better than that. I can't eat that." And he threw these sandwiches away. That's what I remember of that. Why I decided to write the book. Well, the intention wasn't to have a book to sell. It was just going to be my thank you to the band. And I worried whether I could afford it to do it. And I couldn't stop writing when I started it. I got really involved in writing down all my thoughts about the band. And I realised it might be of interest to others. But there again, I hadn't shown anybody in the band it, and I didn't know how it would go down. And I can't remember exactly now, but I think they were picking me up at Wetherby to go to a concert up at the northeast. And in the meantime, I'd had these, David Horsfield had encouraged me to have it done as a sales thing. And I said, I don't want them to be seen to be making money out of the book, because I said it wouldn't go down well, but I wouldn't want to lose money. And he said, "You won't lose on this, Frank, you'll need more copies than what you're planning." But I said, "No, it isn't about what I can make, it's just the comfortable of knowing that it's there for all time." So I said the band hadn't seen any of it, and I was getting on the bus at Wetherby to go to a concert somewhere, and I'd just taken delivery of the book the previous day, and I took about 30 copies onto the band bus to give everybody a copy on the journey up. And I sat there, generally was very frightened, thinking, "Oh, I hope I aren't upsetting the band doing this now." And everybody sat looking at the copy, and they were silent, had no idea what they were thinking. And when they'd all read, they just put the book in the pocket, and nobody said anything, and I still didn't know what the reaction was. And then towards the end of the night, one or two came and complimented me on it, and they liked it, so that meant everything to me. And one or two says, "You'll need a lot more copies than that." But I didn't have any more done, because I just didn't want to spoil what appeared a success. And that's how I come to have that done. But I should have had more done, really. Magic of Black Dyke. So one man came up to me at one of the concerts, and said, "What's magic about them then?" I said, "I don't know, but I know they've got it." And I never knew whether this man approved or what. He didn't incline, he just said, what's special about being called Black Dyke? The first time Major Parks was with them after I did the booklet, I can't remember when it was, but it wasn't that opening concert when they were on sale, but when he read his copy, the next concert they were doing, I can't recall where it was, but he was conducting the next concert, and I asked permission off the band, could I put these books on sale? I didn't want anything for it, but I didn't want to be seen to make money out of it. Could I sell them at concerts? And they said, "Of course you can sell them at concerts. You've every right to." And I put one on show on the counter, and Major Parks was taking that concert. And as he came down the aisle, he saw my little book on it, and he picked it up and he opened it up and he moved everything out of the way and put it. He says, "Now they can see it." And I was embarrassed because I didn't want the band to think I'd moved all the programmes out of the way just to show my book off. And anyway, it turned out all right. I remember when there were rehearsal in the band room with Geoffrey Brand for the test piece, whichever year it was, I'm not sure. And it was called Spectrum, was this music. And Geoffrey Brand was trying to get the response from the players to visualise in their minds what it stood for. And they said, "Think of Spectrum, what does it remind you of?" And somebody shouted out straight away, "Brighouse." And everybody creased themselves with laughing. One thing, following contests, if ever they won a contest, Major Parks always gave me the conductor's baton. And I think I've got 3 at home where he gave me one and the end was broken off. He said, "That will be worth more than the others. I caught it on the stand, that's how it's broke." And I'll tell you something else that the Major doesn't know I know. But the last time they won anything, I was looking forward to the baton. And Major Parks had just bought a special one. And I heard him say to somebody, "I can't give Frank this." And he never said any more, but he gave me a baton, but it wasn't the winner. And I still have it. But it was a winner as far as I was concerned. Can't remember the exact remark I gave him, but I complimented on the performance and said that will take some beating. And he made a remark to the fact that you can win them all if you're in the right frame of mind. You could win them all. So, "Well, you can't win everyone." He says, "Why can't you? You can." And he says, "I believe you can." That always left a mark on me, really. My 70th birthday concert at Pateley was very special, and I felt very proud when I heard the band saying afterwards, "That's the best job we've done, including last weekend." And the last weekend had been in Australia. So I said, what a change. Australia on the Sunday and Pateley on the Friday night. And that'll always live with me there. And they let me choose most of the programme, and I wanted the 1812 at the end. And Derek Jackson took me on aside and said, "Frank, I don't want to upset you, but we daren't do the fireworks on this. It'll blow the east window out." And I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah, it's too risky. It could blow a section of it out." So I said, "Don't worry about it. You do what you think." He says, "Well," he says, "it wouldn't be wise to risk it." So they did it without. So the drummer was giving the drums right welting banging when that. David King. I have wonderful memories of David King. He was a very, very talented conductor. And he was ruthless in many respects, but the band believed in him, and that's why they were still with him. But I recall one night particularly when they were rehearsing a piece for one of the cup competitions. I don't know which one it was, but it was one of the recent ones. They'd been given homework to do rehearsing, and when it came to the rehearsal night, and it was a shambolic affair, and he did his nut with them, and he walked, and I thought he was going to walk between the back row of cornet players and the front row. He was leaning over the back row, and his back was, and he was driving them through hell with this piece. And apparently, when he'd asked them to rehearse it at home, and he said it stood out a mile they hadn't rehearsed it at home, and he told them so. Stood out a mile, you haven't rehearsed them this. That's all I asked for, and you couldn't be bothered to do it. Now we've a half an hour that we could have used on something else. And he rehearsed him, he really drove them on in this half hour. There was a funny atmosphere because they knew he was annoyed. And when he finished, got it as he wanted, he said, he stood and applauded. He said, "There you are, that's all I wanted. But I asked you to do it, and we've had it to do it tonight because it stood out a mile, you haven't done it." And he says, "Why?" And he said, I applaud what you've done, but it shouldn't have been necessary." I never really got to know Jim Watson. I used to always say good evening. Sometimes the response was, there was a response, but I never felt welcomed, whether he thought I was the old school and were observing him all the time, which you do anyway. But he never did me any harm, but I never felt at ease. I felt it was keeping me at arm's distance, but whether that's true, I don't know. Well, Morgan's been a personal friend because I was there the night he had his rehearsal, and I think, am I right, I think he was only 16. And we'd never heard of this lad before, and I've forgotten what piece he played, but he left them breathless. And I think it was Big Derek Jackson that said he wants snapping up now before Brighouse get hold of him. And they took him on. Morgan Griffiths was a very good friend of mine. And I felt very sad when he finished with the band, but I don't think it was his choice to finish. I think one or two thought he was a bit young yet to carry that responsibility. But I still think that he ought to have conducted a bit longer too. But anyway, he's happy doing what he does. But he came and did me 2 solo jobs at concerts at Paisley, and he wouldn't let me pay him. But anyway, you make a lot of friends in banding, don't you? Well, I think they're looked up to, even by rivals, but they would be less likely to admit it. But I think they're well looked up to. I think people seem more preoccupied by scoring ahead of Black Dyke. They'd rather do that than win on their own. But I think they're very special. You could go anywhere in the world and they'll have heard of Black Dyke. I got a shock of my life when I walked into the band room this morning. In fact, I broke down crying mildly because I couldn't believe it was just incredible. Every wall I looked at, every picture, and I'm not exaggerating to say that you could spend a whole day, 8 or 9 or 10 hours in there and still not see it all. It's so very moving. I was very proud to be able to come back and have a look at it, because it must be 8 years ago that I last was in the band room. And although this is drawing to a close now, I must say what a lovely surprise I got when Nick Childs turned up only a few minutes ago, because he knew we were here and came to see us. And I said that meant a lot to us. And the help and support I've had in contributing this has been something I shall always remember. It's very emotional to come back, but it's very, very nice too.